Guess what? When we delivered that record, you know what record came out right then?
Yeah.
Nirvana.
Yeah. Yeah.
Game over.
Yeah.
Game over for any band that didn't have a heroin problem. We got tour support and we got a bus
Yeah.
and we went out on the road with Richard Marx.
No shit.
The Wolves got together. I think the first time we played, it was like magic. 8 record labels fighting over us. Frankie got behind his kid and he's like, fellas, I'm gonna be sick. Like, no, you can't throw up now. And he's like, who's this rock band? Let's get rid of these rock bands. You know, whoever ain't selling platinum, they're going.
I think it's a travesty that it didn't fucking blow up.
I play more than 3 chords.
Sure.
I know more than 3 chords. Sometimes I'm not allowed to play more than 3 chords. I'll try and be entertaining and make some shit up. I play the shit out of those 3 chords.
That's right. Were you a Dolls fan before?
I was not. I was not.
Sure.
Like I was not a Hanoi fan or a Michael Monroe fan either. Valid, but
Relevant.
relevant. Thank you. Man, you are the wordsmith today. I'm just like.
Chicks just love me for my big dictionary.
And I just had a little conversation with Keith today, and we're, writing some new stuff. I did not give the same interview over and over again.
The hair metal guru from Warren to Crew. The hair metal guru. Never forget Charlie too.
Hey, today I'm pumped to have Steve Conte on the channel. Steve has had just a storied career in music, working with some of the biggest acts around, from the New York Dolls to Paul Simon, believe it or not. The fans of this channel might know him best from the band Company of Wolves, who put out a phenomenal self-titled album in 1990, and he is currently the guitarist for one of my favorite acts in music, Michael Monroe, and he just released a fantastic solo album called The Concrete Jangle last year. Steve Conte, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Anthony. How
Hey,
you doing?
we actually kind of got to talking about this because I was talking about Company of Wolves on X, and I said some things, and you chimed in, and you're like, well, I didn't remember doing that. And I was like, hey, while I got you here, I would love to have you on. So you were like, hey, let's set it up. So
All right.
I'm a
Here we
huge
are.
fan.
Ask away, man. Anything you want to know about the Wolves or anything.
If you can see, I got my Company of
I'm just going
Wolves.
to tell a bunch of outrageous lies. So just.
Oh, hey, that's awesome. That's awesome. So basically, you're going to be like every other rock star that I've ever interviewed,
Yeah, you know what? That's the problem with me. I'm too honest.
right?
And therefore, my interviews are very factual. And, if you want to really know what happened, you see me. But, if you want that kind of like showbiz, Hollywood kind of entertainment, you go to somebody like David Johansen. Well, you can't anymore, but,
Right. Right.
he was he gave a great interview because, all he did was do bits, what I
Right.
mean? He did like his little act and, told outrageous things and made up
Right.
shit, whatever.
Right.
So, yeah, I'm learning, I've been doing this a while, but I still learning every day.
Hey, man. Hey, I started this.
I did not give the same interview over and over again.
I started this channel less than 2 years ago, but I've interviewed some of the big names, and the best interviews have just been the ones where people don't try to blow smoke and like you said, just tell it the way it is. So,
All right, well, that's what you're gonna get.
yeah,
I'll try.
awesome.
I'll try and be entertaining and make some shit up.
Hey, sounds good. Sounds good. So yeah, so I want to talk about the Wolves. I want to talk about the time of Michael Monroe, and I definitely want to talk about your solo album. But like, what was your beginning? How did you get started in music, and what led to you going, frick, this is what I want to do with my life?
Well, you see this shirt? I just realized, this shirt I have on here
Yeah.
is very much like George Harrison on the back of Abbey Road. He was wearing supposedly he was a grave digger. Remember?
Right.
Like the jeans and the desert boots and
Right.
jean work shirt.
Yeah.
I'd say Abbey Road and it was pretty influential in me
Sure.
doing what I do. But every Beatles album was, and especially Revolver. That's the
Right.
first one I heard. I heard Revolver when I was a kid, like 6 years old,
Yep.
and I just immediately wanted to be Ringo. I just wanted to be a drummer,
Right.
and that's what it was for the first I think I started playing drums at around 7, taking lessons.
Right.
At 9, I was playing a kit. By 11, I picked up my brother's guitar and started teaching myself and started writing songs, even though I
Yeah.
didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
So I thought I got to play guitar. I can't be stuck behind the drum kit there. So I switched the guitar. He was playing guitar. He was the guitarist. He switched to bass, and next thing you know, the rest is history. Here we are. Great
Speaking
bass
of
player.
speaking of Beatles influence, I was just listening to your solo album, the new one, and the song "Decomposing a Song for You" to me is totally a Beatles. Like it sounds like it, is a Beatles influence anyway.
Yeah, well, John was probably my biggest Beatle influence. I mean,
Okay.
I love Paul and I love George. I'd say songwriting wise, John was darker,
Yep.
the darkest. So I even as a 6-year-old kid, when I heard She Said, She Said, which is, written from an acid trip when he was talking to Peter Fonda and saying, hey man, I know what it's like to be dead. Dark shit like that in the Tibetan Book of the Dead from Tomorrow Never Knows, like all the weird Lennon shit. I had Strawberry Fields and
Yep.
I'm the Walrus and all that kind of really out there. It's the Revolution 9, you know. Used to actually scare me, that one from the
Right.
album. But
Right.
Dear Prudence and I'm So Tired. I like the Lennon sort of darker ones. And then George also had a really cool, not too poppy. He had his Indian vibe of like With and Without You and Love You Too on Revolver and the introduction of the sitar and his rockers were great too. Taxman and I Want to Tell You but I mean Paul is obviously a genius pop songwriter and I love
Yep.
those Paul songs too. Got to Get You Into My Life and Penny Lane and
Yeah.
I got my melodic sense from him, but really the darker and the chords and the vibe I got from John and George.
Sure. Sure. So you mentioned your brother John, who ended up playing bass. You played guitar. Like, were you always planning on working together? Because he was in Company of Wolves.
Yep.
When did you first start playing in bands? And was John with you right away?
Yeah, our first band was we recorded our debut album on cassette tape in our living room, our family
Okay.
living room. When I was 11, he was 10.
Sure.
And we just had to kind of move we had a little tape recorder with a little plastic mic, that plugged into it, and we just had to move the mic around until the drums weren't too loud. So we had to kind of put the tape recorder across the room, and whoever was ever playing guitar and singing would like get right up on it, but the drums were in the background.
Right.
How we got in time, I have no idea, because the drummer definitely couldn't hear what the guitar player was playing, but
Sure.
it somehow ended up working. I still have those tapes, and there's some great stuff on it. So that was when we started, as an original band when we were 9, 10, 11 years old.
Yeah.
And then, we did our like high school band kind of thing. We do dances and teen centers and the swim club and Battle of the Bands and all that kind of stuff. And then, right through, through high school, through middle school, through high school, into college. Then we had like my original band when we got out of college. We moved to New York, but before then we were still playing around in New Jersey a little bit. We were living in New Jersey.
Sure.
And we were called the Steve Conte Band, and we had a bunch of different names.
Yeah.
None of them really stuck, and eventually we moved to New York, and we met up with Keith, the lead
Sure.
singer, and my songwriting partner, Company of Wolves, and Keith and I started writing songs together, and we were like, hey man, we got about 6 really good songs here. We got to think about starting a band together, because someone just put us together, thought we'd be great songwriters together.
Sure.
And I was like, Keith was like, oh, I know a drummer, Frankie LaRocca. And I knew him from, he played with Bryan Adams and John
Yeah.
Waite, Scandal, and David Johansen.
Yeah.
And I was like, great, well, I know a bass player, my brother. So that was the band. It was like ready-made. And the Wolves got together, I think the first time we played, it was like magic.
Right.
You know, everybody knew their role, and we all knew what we loved, and we loved the same stuff. You know, we loved The Who, we loved Cheap Trick, we loved Beatles and Stones, Zeppelin, and you know that was pretty much our
You mentioned going to college. Where did you go? Where did you go to college?
Rutgers University, New Jersey.
And what did you take up there?
I studied jazz guitar.
Oh, okay.
Jazz guitar. Believe it or
Okay.
not. Yeah, I play more than three chords.
Sure.
I know more than three chords. Sometimes I'm not allowed to play more than three chords.
Right. You played with the New York Dolls, so
Yeah.
no, I'm just kidding.
Yes. And you know, I play the shit out of those three chords.
That's right. That's right. Okay, so you get together with Keith, and if you don't know Keith Brewer, the singer of Company of Wolves, he had a song on the Fast Times at Ridgemont High soundtrack with the band called the Ravens,
There you go, man.
called Raised on Radio, and so he obviously, I mean, so he had a record deal before, and I mean that must have like, what had he been doing since that project that led him to you? If I can I just want to kind of figure out how you guys all came together.
Yeah. Well, you know, my brother and I had moved to New York. We were in New York for about a little more than 2 years at that point. And, you know, 2 years in New York City when you're scuffling and trying to make a living playing music full time, 2 years drags on. It seemed like 10,
Right.
you know, but we were like, God, we gotta put a band together. We gotta like find a singer. And, you know, I'm a singer, but I was like,
Yeah.
I was set on finding a front man so that I could
Right.
just write, play guitar, and be like the guitar hero dude, and you know, let's guy. So you know, at that point, when I met Keith, he had already had a record deal with the Ravens. With I think they were with MCA. Frankie had already done a bunch of records with Adams, with Wade, with Scandal, with Johansson.
Yeah.
And so we were like the new kids in town. You know, we hadn't done anything. We were, you know, just bundles of talent that hadn't done anything yet. You know, it
Yep.
happens to everybody when they first, you know, get to town or get started. So we were kind of, you know, those guys were like, wow, they had a record deal. Oh, he played with Adams, you know. And we were like, but, you know, musically, we're all on the same level. You know, it was just like people who had done more in the biz, you know.
Right.
So we had a blues band, my brother and I, called the Hudson River Rats.
Okay.
And we had been playing down at this club called Under Acme in New York for like a year. And this gig would go on for like 2 or 3 years. Every Wednesday night, we had our blues band, the Hudson River Rats, and we would do a set, and then guests would come up. We'd have to rehearse with them in the afternoon, and the criteria was you had to do a 12-bar blues, and you know, you had to be able to sing, and you know, the more well-known the people were, the more guaranteed they were to get up. Like we
Sure.
had Billy DeVille came, David Johansen came when he was Buster, David Clinton Thomas from Blood, Sweat and Tears, Julian Lennon, Phoebe Snow, Carole King, Cyndi Lauper. I mean, so many. You know, this thing got legendary and got out of control. We were on the news, and it was like, this is the scene, and it was a great scene for a couple of years. And the guy who did like the MC gig, Jeff Kent, friend of ours, who's passed away now, but he was a great B3 player, and he knew all these studio players. He knew Will Lee and you know, the guys from the Blues Brothers, like Lou Marini, and all these studio cats and studio singers and studio players. And he brought all these studio people down, and they got to see us play and play with us. And eventually we started getting hired for a lot of sessions. So it was a great thing for us.
Sure.
But also Jeff said, I know this singer. He's really great. He writes, he says he does like Beatles imitations. Like he can do like the voice, you know, the Liverpudlian voices, you know. Yeah, that should be entertaining, but it doesn't mean we're going to work together well.
Right.
But he came up to my house, Keith, one day on my friend Jeff's recommendation, and he knocked on my door. I opened it up. I was like, "Oh, this guy looks a little bit like Billy Joel." He had short hair back then,
Right.
And I was like, "All right, come on in. Let's see what we can do." And we wrote "The Distance"
Yeah.
day. That was the first song we wrote together.
Way.
Like, whoa, okay. I think the second song was Everybody's Baby. So we started writing like acoustic songs first.
Yeah.
It was me and him. And then we were like, I was like, well, I got this rocker. And then he had a rocker. And then, before you know it, we had like I said, 6 songs. And then we just called the other guys in and that was it, man. Like first rehearsal was like, bam, we are a band.
So after that, when you get the other guys, I mean, how long are you playing the clubs, or is it more maybe your songwriting, maybe a demo that leads you to getting record label interest?
Yes, the latter.
The latter.
We probably, we didn't slug it out for years like a lot of bands did.
Right.
We pretty quickly, word got out that there was this great band with really good songs, right? Because that's always the thing, record company guys and other band guys walk around going, yeah, they ain't got no songs.
Right.
No songs was like the worst thing anyone could say about you. Good
Right.
band, they got no songs. Good singer, they got no songs. We had great players and we had great songs.
Right.
So I think it was just a matter of having a great manager, which we finally got through Frankie, who knew Larry Mazer, who was managing Cinderella and Kiss and some other, the Nelsons, remember?
Yep.
Matthew.
Yep.
And Larry came to see us and we met him and he loved the band, he loved the songs. And he got like 8 record labels fighting over us. He was
Right.
like, oh, you want this? No, you can't have them. Oh, no, you can't have them. You want? No, you can't have. This kind of thing. And we had like the showcase. We used to do showcases in
Yeah.
New York. Here. I mean, they probably still do, but they're more like a bunch of hip hop dudes with a
Right.
and a fucking track behind them. But we actually played.
Yeah.
We played this club, the Sanctuary, on 42nd Street, and we had like 6 labels, I think, come down: Capitol, MCA, Polygram, not EMI, I forget, like a bunch of labels.
Yeah.
And we got offered, I think, 3 or 4 deals
Okay.
from that gig. And Larry and we felt like it would be best to go with Polygram because Larry was in an ongoing relationship with them, with Cinderella and Kiss. And,
Yeah.
I like your wall, by the way. Nice.
Oh man.
Poster behind your head there to your right.
Yeah.
So yeah, we did this showcase, and I remember Frankie. Frankie could be like a nervous wreck,
Right.
And he's like, we were about to play. We sat down, and we were like, ladies and gentlemen, Company of Wolves, and we got down. Frankie got behind his kidney. He's like, fellas, I'm gonna be sick. It's like, no, you can't throw up now. Come on. But we did the gig and we got offered the deals and we ended up taking the Polygram deal because Larry had the relationship.
Yep.
And who knows if that was the right choice, but that was the choice we made. And what happened, and here we are.
So you get signed and you go into the studio. What now? I forget his name. Was it Jeff Glicksman?
That's Glicksman.
Jeff Glicksman,
who had done. Well, he got. I want to say pushed on us, but not really.
Okay.
He was recommended by our A&R guy. I mean, we had a wish list of like, we want to work with, Andy Johns and the guys who did Zeppelin and the guys who did,
right?
whatever. And everybody was busy. And he was like, how about this guy? He did the Georgia Satellites. We're like, Georgia Satellites? We love the Georgia Satellites.
Yeah.
So we were like all down with Jeff. And Jeff had done Soraya, who was another band on Polygram Mercury at that
Yep.
time. So, but it was the satellites thing that sold us. So we went to Austin, Texas with Jeff and recorded in the studio where the satellites did their debut. We used the satellites amps, we used their heads, their cabinets, their producer, their studio, and somehow our record still came out sounding like it did. It came out sounding gigantic.
Right.
The satellites were a pretty rootsy,
Yes.
Creedence, Stones.
I love the Georgia Satellites.
Yeah, so do I. And we love that, but we also love the bigger stuff, the Zap and the
Sure.
Babs and the Purples and the
Yep.
AC/DCs and Aerosmiths. So yeah, that was the combination. Us four with that management, that label, and that producer.
So once you got done recording it, and you're like, the label's like, all right, here, we have this finished product. We're gonna put it out. Did you feel like the label got behind it? I mean, you guys got a couple videos. So obviously I collect. I mean, you did see some ads and shit. This was framed in my basement, so I didn't just pull it out I actually have it up in my house because I love this album. I seriously, and I think it's a travesty that it didn't fucking blow up. Pardon my language. So
Yeah,
anyway, go ahead.
that's what happened. Was we put the record out, and actually by the time we recorded the record in '89.
Yeah.
I think we started around spring of '89. We went through the summer.
Yep.
We've taken some time off too, because we did the tracks twice.
Sure.
We did the tracks in New York at Atlantic Studios.
Okay.
Then we took those tracks to Austin to overdub on them, and we realized the drums weren't right.
Okay.
We had to have Jeff Glicksman wanted to use Ian Pace from Deep Purple because he had done a Deep Purple record. He was like, man, let's just, Frankie is not cutting it. Let's just get, I'm sorry to, spill the beans here, but
Nope.
like I said, I'm the truth teller in interviews.
Yep.
Frankie sort of fancied himself a producer, and he didn't think that Glicksman was a good producer. So
Sure.
he was like, I don't think he's got the sounds. I don't know, guys. I don't know. He's not the right guy, And it was making him all freaked out and nervous. I think he played really bad because we were trying to record to his takes, and we're like, oh, it's fast. Oh, it's slow. Oh, it's fast. We're like, we got to do these over. So
Right.
he wanted to get Pace, and we said, no way, man. We're a band. Frankie's our drummer. We're dedicated to our drummer.
Yep.
So we flew Frankie out to LA. And the money is going up and down, up, down, and down and down.
Yeah.
Our bill to the label is going up and up and up.
Right.
Recutting the tracks in Cherokee Studios in LA to the point where Frankie and the producer couldn't even talk to each other. I'd be out there playing in the room with Frankie, and Jeff would go, Steve, come in here. And I'd have to go in, and he'd duck down behind the desk and go oh, will you tell Frankie, don't play that fill there. And they couldn't even look each other in the eye. It was
Right.
It was so weird. But we eventually got the tracks at Cherokee in LA. And then we went back to Austin, finished recording the guitars there. And actually we came back to LA to mix, and we did more guitars, and we did more background vocals. And we met the choir boys, the London choir boys.
Yeah.
They were recording in the same studio. We got them on the record. We became friends. And, after the record was out, Rolling Stone did this big cover. I don't know if it was a cover story, but it was definitely a centerfold and 4 or 5 pages.
Yeah.
Of, 4 bands that are the new blues bands. And it was Company of Wolves, London Choir Boys, Junkyard, and the Black Crowes.
Yeah.
And they said, these are the bands to watch out for this year.
Yep.
And then by the time that, I guess the record had come out at that point, but between the time that we had started recording and finished the record, we lost the label president. So we
Okay.
had no head of a label.
Right.
So here they are. Everybody loves the band at the label. The radio guys love it. The promo people love it. They're off. We became friends with them all. We would hang out. We would go out for drinks, and maybe that was a good thing. Maybe it wasn't. Our manager thought it was a great idea for us to be friendly. I personally think we got a little too friendly, and maybe they thought, it's just those guys,
Sure.
Some band from England would come in and they go, ooh, the English guys are coming in. And, oh, it's just the guys from downtown when the Wolves came in,
Yeah.
So, but we didn't really have a head of the label to say, now you got to do this. Now you got to get out there and do that. And,
Yep.
and everybody was kind of on their own to like, well, we think this will work. We think that'll work.
Yep.
And in some cases it did. In many cases it didn't.
Right.
Like the video guy who decided to pull our video from Call of the Wild off of MTV to save our power for the second video, The Distance,
Oh,
which MTV hated and wouldn't play.
right.
Then they said, oh, well, can we get Call of the Wild back on now? No.
Yeah.
Duh. So
Right.
we had shit like that happening with
When
when there's nobody giving you directions from high above, I guess it could be a challenge. I don't know. I'm not a working guy. I've never had a job like that.
yeah,
The only other thing I've ever done besides play guitar is paint houses.
sure.
And I
Sure.
don't mean paint houses. I mean paint houses.
Okay. This is all, and man, thanks for your shining a lot of light on stuff. So the album comes out. There's record label fucking dysfunction because the president's gone, and nobody's really calling the shots for you guys. But when you get done, is there do they come up with a plan? Like, okay, did they give you tour support? Did you get offered any decent tours? What did you tour?
Yes.
And did
Yeah,
you
so
feel
we-
like, go ahead.
Yeah, so we did. We got tour support and we got a bus,
Yeah.
and we went out on the road with Richard Marx.
No shit. I didn't know that.
We went out on the road with Richard Marx for like a couple of months in arenas. But it was like, you guys want to go out on tour, right away into arenas? And we're like, sure, why not? I mean, I didn't know about like, you're supposed to get in the van and play shitty clubs and sleep on people's couches and, all that shit. It was like, do you want to make a record and then get on a tour bus and play arenas? Fuck yeah, I do.
Yeah, of course.
So that's what we did. And, Richard Marx gave us half the stage, don't go up on these things. Of course, we did our little thing and we got yelled at and,
Right.
But we did that for about half a year. And then we went into clubs with Salty Dog. Remember that band?
Yep. Come along. Yep.
Come along.
We
We did some with Salty Dog, and we did some with this Swedish band called the Epileptic Boys,
Okay.
or Electric Boys, actually.
The Electric Boys.
Epileptic Boys, I call them.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were not so nice.
Okay.
I'll leave it there. We did that for about another 6 months. Yeah, so we were out for about a year, and we had 4 songs on the charts and in the in the album tracks.
Yeah.
2 were top 20.
Yeah.
But by the time we did the second record, guess what? When we delivered that record, you know what record came out right then?
Yeah.
Nirvana.
Yeah. Yeah.
Game over.
Yeah.
Game over for any band that didn't have a heroin problem, long beards, long shorts, Doc Martens, flannels, dreads, or, hippie,
And
Northwest vibe.
Right.
So, nobody wanted to know about a rock and roll band from New York who was having fun. Everybody wanted to be depressed, fucking heroin-addled, and, Seattled.
and you
Seattled,
guys
Seattle.
you guys didn't like to me, you didn't really, and I like, I like the hair metal stuff. I do. But you guys didn't really fit into that. I mean, you were doing different, you weren't playing suck me, fuck me stuff. You guys were a lot, you didn't dress that way. So you were probably hard to pigeonhole anyway.
Yep.
But when grunge came out, anybody who came before it was basically screwed.
Yeah.
So
Pretty much. And yeah, that's the thing. I remember our promo publicity girl saying to us, "Well, we can't get you, in the big mags yet. We can't get you in Rolling Stone and whatever the other big mags, Circus or I think we did have a review in Circus, but they were like trying to get us in Metal Edge and all
sure.
these kind of like, you know,
Yep.
lower magazines that did like the hair metal things. And like, but you guys don't have that vibe. We can't market you there because, you guys wear jeans and boots and motorcycle jackets and t-shirts. And, these guys are all wearing do-rags and glitter and, spandex. I'm like, well, we're not about to do that.
Right.
That's not what we do. But, eventually when we went on the road, we started meeting these ladies in different towns who were like, "Oh, I have a boutique. Come to our boutique after." And they'd take us back to their shop, and we'd get like these purple shirts with onks, gold onks on them, with like the head right. And before you know it, we were kind of dressing
Sure.
not too unlike some of those other bands. Not that we wanted to be like them, but it just sort of happened.
Right.
And we were out on the road, so we weren't getting regular haircuts. So the
Right.
hair was growing, and
Right.
got to contain this. Put a fucking rag around your head,
Yep.
And
Yep.
yeah, but still, but musically, we were closer to the Stones, Aerosmith, Creedence, AC/DC, Zeppelin. We weren't, She's My Cherry Pie.
Right.
You know,
Like when you mentioned the Black Crows, there's probably a little more Black Crows. Like it felt like when the Black Crows started getting big, that could have been the Company of Wolves time as well.
it could have been, and it was the same time, except they had marketing.
Yeah.
And they had management that worked hard with the head of the label,
Yep.
and they had, they were young guys who listened to what people told them. We were like maybe a bit more stubborn because we had been around the block. We
Sure.
were a bit older, probably 5 years older than those guys. So we're like, we're not letting, these guys do it. We know what we want. But those guys were told, listen to these records. You're an REM cover band, forget that. Listen to these Humble Pie records. They'd never heard of that shit before.
Right.
And then they just, they jumped on that bandwagon. And, yeah, that could have been us.
When
But-
when you guys got done with the touring and all that, and like you said, you started to record the second album. I mean, was the label like, all right, here we go for album number 2, we're behind you? Or was it, did you feel like, oh shit, this isn't good?
We were a little bit. I don't think we had that much contact with them at that point.
Okay.
I think I don't remember if we turned in demos and they weighed in on what songs should be on or not, but
Right.
we pretty much, we had a producer for the second album as well, like we did with Glicksman for the first. But with both our producers, they were really engineers that got great sounds and, organized the sessions and the budget and all that.
Yep.
They weren't so much like producers who would come in and rip your songs apart and like, all right, let's put the chorus here and then you got too much of that there. We like arranged and produced ourselves pretty much.
Sure. Okay.
So I think, and basically the label, they had heard our demos and that's what they signed us based on. They were like, we love your demos. And we said, okay, well, let's press up our demos and make, oh, no.
Right.
you haven't spent enough record company money on those demos. You have to get into debt with us first,
Right.
right? So the demos, they loved us because they're demos, but they're good, but not good enough to put out. Well, of course, they were good enough to put out, and we have put them out ever, since, and not long after, in fact. And we just re-released the demos with a French label called Bad Reputation.
Okay.
Album called Shakers and Tambourines.
That's sitting in my fucking Amazon cart. Pardon me. So I'm about ready to pull the trigger on that. But I want
Yeah, do it. And there's actually an extra track on there that, because we had released it like shortly after the band left the label.
Yep.
But we put our theme song called "Company of Wolves," which we never really played live. It was just it was a song that didn't make any of the albums. We put that on the demos album. But so yeah, they didn't say anything like, oh, we don't hear a single or blah blah blah, But it never even got to that point, because by the time we delivered the album,
Yep.
we started recording the second album in '91. I don't think Nirvana was out yet.
Right.
By the time that the album was finished and ready to go, probably like the fall of '91. Yeah, because I think that's when they came out. Because I have a compilation album called "The Fall of DGC," David Geffen Company, right?
Right.
Nirvana was on that compilation, and it came out in the fall. And our record, we delivered it in the fall of '91. That's when Nirvana came out. And at that point, there was not even any talk of what's the single. It was just like a new president came in. Oh, that's what happened. Yeah.
Yep.
We had a new president come in who loved the smooth R&B stuff like Tony and Vanessa Williams. And he's like, who's this rock band? Let's get rid of these rock bands. Whoever ain't selling platinum, they're going.
Yeah.
We were not selling platinum. We weren't even selling gold.
Right.
I mean, in those days, if you didn't sell gold, you were a failure.
Yeah.
I mean, we sold like 100,000 records, which today would be like amazing. You
Right.
sold 100,000 records. But back then it was a failure because, bands were going double, triple platinum.
Yep.
And so the new guy at the label, whose name I won't even mention, just said, let's get rid of him. So then we tried to get re-signed for a while, but of course the label wanted to try and get their money back for everything that they gave us, which is about $1 million over the course of 2 albums and 2 publishing deals.
Right.
And no label was $1 million,
Yeah.
even 250 or whatever it was just for the one record. No thanks. We'll go to Seattle. So then came Candlebox and all those copycat, grunge bands that were like watered down crap. There were about 4 really good ones.
Yeah. Yep.
Stone Temple Pilots, Nirvana, Soundgarden, Mudhoney,
Sure.
Trees, maybe.
Sure.
Yeah.
Is the album that came out later called Sterile Spy Case? Is
Yeah.
that the second album?
Those are songs that would have been on the second album. Yes. And now, well, not yet, but pretty soon we're going to be putting out those songs on that album, from that album, with that same label that did the demos in France.
Bad Reputation.
Yeah, and by the way, the debut was released just a few months ago by Rock Candy
Rock Candy.
in the UK.
Yep.
And it's also become available on all the streaming services, the
Yes.
debut, which it wasn't for the first fucking 20 years of streaming.
Right.
But I got in touch with our old lawyer, and she worked some magic and got them to actually, put
Phenomenal.
the debut on the streaming services. But now we're putting out like the other stuff. And I just had a little conversation with Keith today, and we're, writing some new stuff.
No way. Shit. One of the first videos I did on this channel, it started about 2 years ago, was on 10 albums that could have and should have but didn't. And one of them was Company of Wolves. I love that out. So anyway, it's so great to hear about that.
Well, thank you. Well, that's the story.
Yep.
And there may be more. This
Awesome.
story may be continuing. I
Awesome.
mean, we're talking about it, so it will be just a matter of when.
And I know there have been periodic shows here and there, right? I mean, you guys have done some.
We've only, I think, since the band dissolved in like '92,
Yep.
which we did because, after not getting re-signed, with that massive, bill that we had that had to be paid back.
Right.
I wanted to just sing my own songs, and Keith wanted to sing his own songs. And me and my brother started our band, the Crown Jewels, and Keith
right.
started a solo career. But where was I going with that?
Was the Crown Jewels, was that the next project?
Yeah, that was the next project from my brother and I.
Yeah.
I mean, those songs I would have been bringing those into the Wolves.
Yeah. Sure.
A lot of those songs, and in fact, Keith co-wrote one with me, Fine Line. But I was saying something important about that, but I can't remember now. But
I think you were talking about how, like, Keith wanted to do his songs, you wanted to do your songs, and so you guys ended
yeah,
up.
it was before that. I was getting into something, but I lost it. Anyway, we just decided to bust up, and
Yep.
it was around '92, I guess. Yeah, and then I started recording in the end of '92, and those songs became some of the Crown Jewels' first album, Spitshine, and Keith did his first solo album. I think Me and My Big Mouth it was called. And
Sure.
but we are
Oh.
we are currently talking about. We have songs, unrecorded originals that we've never recorded. We just gave one to the London Choir Boys guys, who have a new band called the Black Eyed Sons. We
Okay.
gave them the first single, "Fooling Yourself,"
Okay.
and
I think when we got off track, I had said that you guys had played some shows, and then you were kind of talking about like.
yeah. So yeah, we had done after we broke up, we had done a show in like maybe 1995.
Okay.
We did one show in Baltimore,
Sure.
and then it was another, I don't know, 20 years. I think it was about 2016.
Right.
We did another show in Baltimore.
Yes.
It's club Route 66 or something it's called. So we've only done two shows since the band has dissolved. But we were talking to a festival in Germany, which the festival owner keeps getting sick and canceling his festival, but they have done a few years prior, so it will be back. But I think we're going to play that festival. It's called the Indoor Fest in Hamburg. I think we're going to play next year. So
Company of Wolves is going to play.
Company of Wolves, yes.
Awesome.
And we also would love to get on some of these, like the M3.
Totally.
And some of these, like, the Monsters of Rock cruise, which I just did with Monroe, that,
Yeah.
a lot of bands on there that, the Wolves could totally wipe the floor with.
Right.
But, it's not a contest, but,
Right.
I'm just saying, if they can do it, why not us?
Right. Right. I would think there's got to be, the fly, obviously not the big touring, but the fly-in dates. Yeah. The cruises, things like that. Totally.
Just for starters, because who knows? After that, hey, we might jewel a whole record and decide, hey, let's go out on the road again.
Sure. Sure. So after Company of Wolves, and you talked about Crown of Jewels, that came out in, shoot, did you have a couple of albums with them? 2 albums?
Yeah. It was really just me and my brother with a couple of different drummers.
Yep.
We did one album in '96, Spitshine, and then another one in '99, Linoleum. And then we did another album calling ourselves the Contes
Yeah.
in 2000, or no, 2003.
Called Bleed Together.
Bleed Together, that's right. And then, we just decided, all right, how long we've been doing this together, you and me, my brother.
Right.
It was like, let's take a break. And I went off to play with Billy Squire and then Willie DeVille and Paul Simon. And he went off to play with Roseanne Cash and Ian Hunter and
Oh wow.
Southside Johnny. And, then we just got used to kind of working apart. And next thing you know, I get the call from the Dolls. And then that turned into 6 years and 4 albums with them. And I'm sure we're going to get to talking about that. And then
Yeah.
Monroe, 15 years and 6 albums with Monroe now. And,
How long did you do? How long were you with Billy Squire? Or because I knew that you did some stuff with him, but I honestly don't know. Like, how did that come about?
well, Billy heard the second Company of Wolves album
Okay.
um, that was supposed to be called Rhythm and Booze.
That's right.
And he loved what he heard, and he said he heard it from our producer, Gary Lyons. Gary Lyons is an English guy who had worked on Zeppelin 4, Night at the Opera, Tattoo You, some shitty little albums.
Yeah.
And so Billy was talking to him about, I think Gary was remixing one of those King Biscuit Flower Hour live concerts for Billy.
Yep.
And, he'd asked Gary, well, what are you working on now? And Gary said, oh, this band, Company of Wolves. And Billy was like, wow, who's that guitar player? Who's singing backgrounds? So he asked me and Keith to come in and be the background singers and do the vocal arrangements on his album, Tell the Truth. And he had me play guitar on a couple songs.
Okay.
And then that was in 93.
Yep.
And then in 2000, so 7 years later, 2001, he called me to, 8 years later, called me to be the guitar player for his Don't Say No 20th anniversary tour.
Okay.
Which was amazing. We toured Bad Company and Styx, and it was all the summer sheds throughout America.
Yeah.
It was a great tour.
I mean, that guy was so huge in the early and then, and we don't have to get into Billy Squire, but just
Yeah.
the things that happened to.
Yeah, that one unfortunate video, but
Yeah.
I mean, I've talked to him about it. He it was his girlfriend at the time was very into fashion, and we guys, we always trust our women, we trust our girlfriends. Like, how do I look?
Yeah.
Her hair, and she was like an artist. This girlfriend of Billy's, and like I think designed the whole set and had the idea for the video. And well, I think it was misunderstood. He was trying to do like risky business apparently.
Yeah.
Like air guitar, like sliding around the floor and whatever. But turned out that he was rolling in some satin sheets, and people mistook that for something else.
Right. But I think, Jagger had a solo album where he was wearing that pink. I don't know if you remember that, but I mean, it looked. But I mean, he's Jagger, so nobody's gonna say anything.
Right.
But,
Yeah, but I mean, that's the thing. Look at the Dolls. I mean, they were fucking wearing full on, dresses and fucking,
Yes.
hot pants and chicks' boots, and but they were introduced as that.
Yes.
I think the fact that Billy came out and was like,
Yeah.
Budweiser, metalhead dudes, big
Yep.
bellies and fucking black t-shirts, I love Billy Squire, man. And then all of a sudden, wait, hold on, Billy Squire's rolling in satin sheets. Hold on, pink. I think maybe that was the disconnect.
Yep.
I mean, Elton John has been fucking gay since day one.
Yeah.
Even though nobody really knew it, or he didn't, come clean with the public till decades later. But didn't hurt his career.
Yeah.
But I think when people think they know you as one thing, and then you all of a sudden appear to be something else, you lose people. So
and so I want to get into the Dolls, but I just briefly, you did some shit with Paul Simon from Simon and Garfunkel, and if I understand right, like when he was preparing his tours, you would stand in for him.
Yep.
Is that?
I was his stunt vocalist.
Yeah. So how the hell did that come about? I mean, that just. That seems really weird. You know, for
One of the craziest gigs I ever had. This guy Mark Stewart, who was in Paul's band, playing cello, guitar, mandolin, just a multi-instrumentalist, genius musician.
Yeah.
He had played cello on one of our Crown Jewels albums, and it was a very soft ballady song, one of our, quieter moments.
Yeah.
And I guess he thought, oh, Steve's got the kind of voice that could do this for Paul, because Paul had been flying in a guy from Chicago and like putting him up in a hotel for 2 months, and
Yeah.
I guess there was some talk of like they wanted to cut down the expenses. So Mark was like, "Well, I know a guy right here in town, and no audition." Paul's brother Eddie was his manager. Eddie Simon. He called me up. He was like, "Hey, Steve, talk to you about singing for Paul," and we worked out a deal. I showed up at rehearsal, and that was it. They sent me a stack of the entire Simon and Garfunkel, Paul Simon,
Yeah.
canon, songbook, whatever.
Yep.
Sheet music, big thick books of music with notes written in. Like I'm not a great note reader.
Right.
Even though I went to school, but I had the whole Paul Simon songbook, and basically I'd be set off to the side of the stage for rehearsals, and I had a music stand, a mic stand, and Paul would bring it was like a 17-piece band, like Steve Gadd on drums, crazy, two percussionists,
Right.
a horn section, two guitar players in the front, an African guy, Vincent Ngini, who's passed away. He was amazing Cameroon guitar player. Mark Bagidi on bass, who played, on his all that, Graceland and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And it was just a crazy musical band. It was like I was like going to school again, to be in a rehearsal room with these guys.
Would you be intimidated walking in there?
What's that?
Would you be like kind of intimidated walking in? I mean,
No, you know what? A little at first was like, wow. But, I'd been around the block a little bit too by that point. So I was like,
sure.
I mean, if it was the first thing I ever done in New York, yeah, I would have been freaked out.
Yeah.
But Paul would go, all right, guys, I got to do this interview now. Let's do Bridge Over Troubled Water. You take it, Steve.
Yeah.
No pressure, just the greatest fucking gospel, pop song ever.
Right. Right.
And then Steve Gadd would be like, hey, Steve, man, come up to the front of the stage and sing with us. Don't stay on the side over there. And I'd be like, yeah, I'll come up front and sing with Steve Gadd, sure,
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was an incredible learning experience.
How long, how long would that?
I did that for 10 years.
No shit.
On and off, whenever he did a tour. So we started in 2001,
Yeah.
and I did Paul's solo tour for You're the One,
Yeah.
leading up to that gig. And then he decided to do a Simon and Garfunkel reunion. So then I sang for Simon and Garfunkel. And some days Paul wouldn't show up, and it would be me and Art. It would be Conte and Garfunkel.
Yeah.
I would sing Paul's part on Scarborough Fair or Sound of Silence, or I mean, these are songs I heard when I was this big. I grew up listening to, like learning how to phrase and sing melodies, And then some days Art wouldn't show up, and it would be Simon and Conte, and we'd do those songs, and I'd sing the other part, So it was nuts.
I would assume something like that would probably pay pretty well, but we don't have to get into that. But.
It did, actually.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. I'm getting an education and being paid for it? Okay.
Right. So now we get into, we talked about the Conte brothers stuff, Crown of Thorns. Now we get into New York Doll. Did I say that wrong? Crown Jewels. Crown Jewels. My bad. And we get to the New York Dolls, and you're in the New York Dolls for 6 years. I mean, you've worked with some of the biggest names in some of the most variedied, Billy Squier to Paul Simon to the New York fucking Dolls, pardon my language. I mean, how did that come about? The Dolls.
Weird. Kind of the same thing. When you live in a town for a while, you build up a reputation for yourself as being a dependable guy, good musician, quick learner,
Yep.
blah blah blah. You know,
Yep.
people notice you and they pass your name around. And that's the way it was with Paul. That's the way it was with well, Billy. It happened with a producer playing in my stuff, but
Sure.
you know that's always been my thing. Is like I did all my drugs and bad behavior before I got to New York. By the time I got here, I was like, nope, I am focusing on you know music and having a career in music and not being a fuck up,
Yeah.
And I ran into plenty of people of my own, in my own of my own age and in my own circle that were still out there, and
Yeah.
and whatever, and messing up all the time. I'm like, well, that's not me.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna, not that I was in any danger of going down there. I had been there, and I said, that's it. If I'm gonna do anything in this biz, I have to, just learn. I have to become a great musician. And actually, I woke up on the lawn. I'll try and get through this story quick.
Please.
When I was 19, I woke up on the lawn of a local college after I had been out from the night before doing all kinds of chemicals and alcohol and cannabis and products and the usual stuff, but like 3 different kinds of up, downs, in betweens. My nose was pouring blood. I woke up in the blazing sun, and I was like, where am I? Oh my God, I'm on the lawn of this college. This must be a sign from God. I have to stop this behavior and start going to this school and get serious about music. And I did. From that point, I just like stopped everything. No
Right.
drinks, health food, tofu, jazz,
Wow.
for years. And that was like, I had tunnel vision, and in like 5 years, bebop jazz, vegetarianism, no substances. And then, little by little, I got back into it, and no hard drugs, but
Yeah. Was that ever tough?
like a party. But so that was that was how, I don't know how I got on that subject,
Oh,
but
it's- Well, I think we were getting to the
oh, the
meat.
dolls. Yeah, yeah. So,
Oh.
so yeah, so I wasn't a Johnny Thunders.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like I wasn't like, oh shit, is he gonna fall off the stage tonight? Is he gonna die on stage? Is he gonna OD? I think like half the time people, went to see him just to see what state he was in.
Yeah. Oh,
I was
totally.
that guy. I was dependable. If you came to see me play, you knew I was gonna play great because that's, my reputation was what I cared about in New York. And so, that's how I got the call from David. That's how I got the call from Paul. That's how people passed my name around. So when David started asking his respected guitar player friends, a couple of guys that he worked with that obviously wouldn't be right for the dolls, didn't look right. One was a bald head, one had a beard,
Yeah.
He was like, who should I call? And they both said, I got the guy. Don't call anybody else. Call Conte.
Yeah.
Got the right look. He's got the right hair. He's got the big nose. He's got the Gibsons. He's got the Marshalls. And so Johansson called me, and we didn't even play a note of music. We went out. We had lunch, and
Yeah.
then he offered me the gig.
Were you a Dolls fan before?
I was
Or-
not. I was
Okay.
not.
Sure.
Like I was not a Hanoi fan or a Michael Monroe fan either.
Right.
I was not a punk rock fan at all. I grew up, Beatles, Stones, Zeppelin, Hendrix, Beck, and and Prague, Yes, and Kansas, and Mahavishnu Orchestra, and I wanted to be a player. I didn't want to be a scenester, guy who looked cool and did dope, and I mean, I thought it was entertaining to look at, but that's not what I aspired to.
Yeah.
I never looked at those guys. Oh, if I could just be a junkie on the corner of 14th Street. No.
Yeah.
No, I was like, if I could just play in Steely Dan, some
Right.
punk rock guys would hate, you know. I loved Todd Rundgren, I loved Steely
Yeah.
Dan, I loved, Larry Carlton, great guitar players. And so, you know, David was used to working with real pros because he had Buster Poindexter, he had all the Uptown Horns guys, he had great players in his band.
Yeah.
He'd been used to working with great New York musicians. So
Right.
when he asked Jimmy Vivino from the Conan Show and Larry Saltzman, who had played in his band, the Harry Smiths, both great guitar players, who should he call? And they said me. He listened.
So we so and this is just kind of for my personal wondering. Like you said, you weren't a Dolls fan. You liked Prague and stuff like that. So was there did you ever feel it, or was it like shit? You know what? This is a great opportunity, and I'm not going to sit around trying to find this perfect band. I'm just like artistically, like you said, you weren't into the Dolls, but had you always been trying to form bands like the one you wanted? Was there any conflict with yourself with joining the New York Dolls?
No,
Okay.
no. At that point in 2004,
Yeah.
I had just the last thing I did was Willie DeVille.
Okay.
I toured with Willie DeVille in 2003,
Yeah.
and he pretty much tours Europe in the summer. That was all he did.
Yeah.
So when we got home from the summer of Europe in the fall of 2003, we went our separate ways, and I was like, I don't remember what I did for the like September, October, November, December, January, February. I think I finally got the call from David early, like maybe March or something. So there was like 5 or 6 months where I don't know what I was doing, if I was playing with different bands or working on a band. And I don't think I was working on a band of my own. I think I was just trying to pay my rent,
Sure.
by playing music.
Sure.
And so when he called, it was like, well, of course, it's a
Yeah.
gig. A
Of
gig is a
course.
gig. And not only that, it's a famous band.
Yeah.
Not only is it a famous band, it's a New York band. And how many New York bands, how many New York rock and roll bands are there?
Right.
I think you can count them on one hand. I think there's three. Dolls,
Yeah.
Rascals, who else? Anthrax, I don't, Ramones,
Yeah.
Kiss. I mean, those are Queens guys, more metal, but you get my point. It's
Yes.
a ready-made band with a
Totally.
guitar player who's dead.
Yes.
He can't come back from the grave.
Right.
There's no way he's going to be back in the band. There's a vacancy.
Yep.
How many guys, how many bands are available like that where you can
Of
just
course.
hop into? So, and I'd known about the Dolls, and I had known about, Thunders, and,
Yep.
it was, even though I wasn't a fan or a disciple or whatever, I got into it. I thought, like any other gig that I ever would have had, like when I got the Blood, Sweat, and Tears gig, I mean, I knew some of those songs from the radio when I was a little kid, but I was like, okay, I got this gig now. I got to listen to all these records, and there's like some complicated shit on it, and
When was the Blood, Sweat, and
I got
Tears
into
game?
that was my first road gig,
Oh.
right out of school,
Oh shit.
right out of
Okay.
college. Yeah,
Before Company of Wolves.
yeah, before Company of Wolves.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So like anything that I ever did, when I got a gig, I tunnel vision went right into it, and I kind of discovered, oh, well, Thunders wasn't the greatest player. He knew about 5 licks and played them over and over again, and they were basically Chuck Berry and Keith Richards licks. And I was like, well, I love Chuck Berry and I love Keith Richards, so I'm just going to operate from there. And
Right.
I don't have to copy Thunders. I already love Chuck Berry and I already love Keith Richards.
Yeah.
But if you play it with maximum balls and attitude and volume, it's going to be close to Thunders. So that
And
was my self-imposed, what's the word? Well,
Guidelines,
ugh.
like guidelines.
Yeah, there's another word starts with a B.
I actually have an English degree, and I can't think of.
Borderlines? No.
No.
But come on, I'm gonna get this. I'm gonna get this, Andy.
You're
It's like
self-imposed.
no, it's like when when people they don't know when they're getting too close to you. What do you call that? Um,
Boundaries.
Boundaries. Those are my boundaries. Thank you, English major.
There you go.
But those are my boundaries. They're like, okay, it ain't gonna be Jimmy Page. It ain't gonna be Jeff Beck. It ain't gonna be Jimi Hendrix. It's gonna be Chuck and Keith, right
Right.
down the middle. And that's what I did, and I got into it, and I got into playing Thunder solos like Thunders, and I played his riffs whenever I felt they were important to be there, and when they weren't, I played my own riffs.
And you did 2 albums with them. Did you? And I should have looked this up, but did you get to do any writing, or was it
Oh
kind
yeah,
of like,
oh yeah,
okay,
yeah. I wrote 8 songs
okay,
on those 2 albums.
okay,
Yeah, I did 4 albums. 2 were live, and
okay?
2 were studio.
Studio, yeah,
Yeah, the first one was with Arthur Killer Kane, was still live at the Rock Festival Hall. The first gigs we did with the Morrissey Meltdown Festival.
okay,
And then the second live album was the Fillmore, which we did some of our new originals as well.
sure,
First one was like all the classic Dolls stuff and some covers.
sure,
But yeah, I wrote Gotta Get Away from Tommy, Rainbow Store, Punishing World, Take a Good Look at My Good Looks with David,
okay,
the last one with David and Syl. And then on the second, that was on the first, the Pink album, One Day It Will Please Us. And on the second one, Cause I Says So, I wrote with David, Better Than You, and This Is Ridiculous. And
okay.
then also, Nobody Got No Business and Temptation to Exist.
Okay.
David, Syl and David and Sammy.
So okay,
So
so
yeah,
what-
8 songs.
yeah. So that was 6 years and 4 albums, 2 studio albums, and then like how did it come about that hey, all right, we're 2010, it ends.
Just I felt that it kind of run its course, mainly because I could feel it because I just had a kid, my first kid,
Sure,
and I needed money and we weren't working.
sure.
Well, there you go.
Yep.
So I had to take other work. So when
Yep.
Sammy had been working with his old pal Michael,
Sammy Yapa.
yep,
Yep.
'cause we had Sammy in the band, and
Yes.
at one point he called me and said, "Hey, you want to come and do some gigs with Michael?" I was like, "Sure, we ain't doing nothing with the Dolls, man. I got to work. Let's
Yeah.
go." So I went out and I went to LA, and they were all out there, and we rehearsed for a day, and they said, "Yeah, great. Let's go do these gigs." We did gigs in like San Diego and San Francisco and LA and Vegas and Austin, Texas, and then they offered me to be in the band. I was like, "Okay, I'll be in the band." And then, David, of course, heard about it and was like, "I heard you're in the Michael Monroe band. Is that so?" I was like, "Well, yeah, because you ain't getting us any gigs, man."
Yeah.
And next thing you know, we're planning a recording session with Michael for a new album.
Yeah.
Because we had been writing songs all summer, and then we had the date, we had the producer picked, we had the date, and we had the place. We had Jack Douglas in LA on September 10th, 2010. We're going to make a record with Michael. Well, like a couple of days after we decide that, Doll's manager calls and says, "Okay, guys, we got a new album with David and Syl." I'm like, "New album? Where's the songs?" "Oh, David and Syl wrote them all." I was like, "Oh, so we're not involved in the writing. Okay. And when is it?" September 10th in England. I'm like, I'm in LA with Jack Douglas. I can't do it, you know. So then they got Frank Infante on guitar from Blondie, and the bass player who was producing the record played bass, Jason Hill from Louis XIV.
Okay.
And that was that. We never quit.
Yeah.
We were fired.
Okay.
We just weren't available to do the album, so they got other people to do the album, and then those people weren't going to play live with them, so they got Kenny Aronson and Earl Slick to play live, and it just started falling apart from there. But that, you know, basically, it's because they didn't take care of business.
And
Get
this
the management and the agent and the gigs, and they would have had a band for another couple of years, you know.
Sure. And this is maybe just like you're not getting paid unless you're doing stuff, right? Like I
And
don't
I'm
know.
not on retainer. No.
Right. Like you're not just getting, hey, I'm in the Dolls, so I'm just getting paid just to hang around and be in the Dolls.
No,
Like,
you know, the only people that keep you on a retainer like that is somebody like Barbara Streisand, or you know, like in maybe I don't know, maybe Lady Gaga, but probably
Right.
not. You
right.
know, because I've heard nightmare stories about like some of the biggest, you know, modern music stars who basically pay their band members shit, and that what they allow them to do is post on Instagram that I'm in the band.
Right.
Really? I'm with
Right.
my landlord. I'm gonna say, look at this, man. I'm in Gaga's band, or not Gaga, 'cause she's cool,
Yeah.
but you know, whoever.
Right.
In so and so's band. Look at my Instagram.
Right.
Can this suffice for my rent this month? No.
Right. Right. Exactly. Okay.
So yeah, no, I'm not on a retainer. I'm not, you know, yeah, if I'm not out there playing, and you know, as we know what's happened with the business with record sales, if you're not out there playing live, you ain't making no money in music, you know, unless, well, maybe if you're, you know, a hot 20-year-old hip hop girl who's selling a million records, maybe, but
Right.
you know, a guy of my mature age, you know, playing rock and roll, you know, we got to be out there playing live.
I mean, you do look good. There's that OnlyFans option. I'm just saying.
Thanks for your confidence there.
There you go. There you go. Okay. So you said Sammy Yaffa says, "Hey man, Michael Monroe could use a guitar player. You come in at 2010. And if there's been a guy that's been prolific as far as putting out albums, and I do want I'm going to ask your opinion on, you know, the logistics of record, you know, so many bands today don't record new music, and you know they are content to live off the past, and I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but you know Monroe has put out shit since you joined, six albums, I think, five albums at least, so
Overdrive, Horns and Halos, Blackout States,
one man gang.
One Man Gang, Live Too Fast to Die Young,
Yep.
and well, we did the live album. That would be six.
Right.
We got a new one coming any day now. Well,
No
we're
shit.
mixing it now. We're mixing it now.
Okay.
You know, because he picks great guys to work with, and great guys who can write songs for him. You know,
Right. And how much? So I know that you wrote a lot on Horns and Halos. Has it been pretty like shit? You wrote the first single, Ballad of the Lower East Side, didn't you?
Yeah.
On Horns and Halos.
Yeah. Well, when I hooked up with him, Ginger was the primary songwriter.
Ginger from the Wild Hearts.
Yeah, Ginger, and but he only lasted for not even a year, I don't think.
Right.
I think he thought he would like to be a guitar player in someone else's band, but when it came down to it, he's his own guy.
Yeah.
He's got to be the man, you know what I mean?
Yep.
So he left, and then they were all like, "Oh no, we lost our songwriter. Who's gonna write songs for us?" And I was like, "Hello." They were like, "Oh, you?" Like, yeah. Have you noticed? I write songs.
Right.
And so, you know, yeah, I wrote every song on that album.
Yeah.
I mean, with, you know, riffs and music and
Yeah.
some ideas from other people, but
Yep.
I think 2 or 3 or 4, some bonus tracks that aren't on the proper album. I wrote as well by myself. And the other ones are riffs from Sammy and riffs from Dragon that were just, here's a riff. Okay, well,
Yep.
a riff is just a riff unless you have a melody and a theme and a lyric and what's it about, and
Yep.
So I wrote the songs over their riff. I wrote the melodies and lyrics that Michael sings. And then when Rich Jones came in the band, he's really a prolific guy. He kind of sits around and writes all day long, every day. And so he would come in with like, here's 50 songs. I'm like, oh, well, I got 5, maybe 7, or maybe 10.
Right.
But just by sheer tonnage, when you
Right.
bring in 50 songs, okay, half of them are going to just throw half of them away.
Of
He's
course.
got 25 and I got 5,
Of
So,
course.
and he's really good. And he writes the style that Michael likes, which is like punk,
Right.
I'm like more of a melody, soulful, classic songwriter.
Yep.
Like, I think the stuff that I give to Michael stretches his voice in a good way, like a more musical way,
Right.
where Rich will just go, let's give him the da, 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 the big
Right.
football chants, which are great,
Right.
but
Right.
I don't really do that.
No.
I could, but I tend to write, I don't know. I like Otis Redding.
Sure. Sure. Yeah, I hear the melodic side. Like I said, I hear some Beatles influence. I hear, I don't know if it's country, but I told you, like, I heard, like, I don't know, some jangly alternative country on the Company of Wolves album. Maybe I'm saying it wrong, but some of those acoustic, in Jilted and in Call of the Wild, um, shit,
Celtic.
that cool acoustic stuff that was going on in some of that. And anyway,
Yeah. We love it. We all love the Faces, Rod Stewart,
yes,
Stones, like the country Stones, like the country honk, and like, not Beggar's Banquet, but Exile on Main Street, Torn and Frayed, like the kind of rootsier, let's
yes,
face it, the Stones and Faces loved American music.
yeah,
They just did their British take on American soul music and R&B. And
Yep.
then we love that almost more than the American R&B it came from. So then we copped that. And,
right. Okay, so Monroe put out "I Live Too Fast to Die Young" a couple years ago. Now you say that you guys have just finished a new one. Is there
it's being mixed now.
okay? Is there any, like, hey, we kind of know when it might come out? Has there been a title?
Well, we're hoping for the fall, but we're running a little behind schedule, so it could be next year. I hope it's the fall, but who knows?
Sure. And how many dates a year are you guys playing? That
I don't know.
are you
I never counted. All I know is, we play most summers in Finland or
Yep.
Europe, and then we also go to different parts of Europe throughout the year too.
sure?
Well, and we'll do like we'll get a UK run coming up,
Yep.
and then I'm doing a solo tour in the UK right after because I'm already there. So
Yeah.
hey, I'm just gonna stay. We'll do Italy and we'll do Spain and Germany and Scandinavia too, and festivals in the summer. But it's not really like a full-time band. I mean, it could be or it should be,
Right.
but we all have to do other things.
Yeah. Okay. And you guys are starting to, I mean, there was a long period where you never saw Michael Monroe in the States. And
No, this is
starting to,
we just came back for the first time in 9 years,
yes.
and now the guys have visas for 2 or 3 years, so I think we're going to be back more often
Okay.
too, which is great for me because hey, I live here.
Sure.
I hate having to run off to Finland every time I need to pay my rent.
Right. Right. You must be treated pretty well in Finland, though, because I think you have
Yeah,
to like worship Hanoi Rocks to even
and
enter.
you know what's funny? The I went out because when we go there, sometimes we stay in town, especially if we're recording or writing. We stay in town in like hotels, or we sometimes we get apartments for like a month, and so we get these apartments, and they have kitchens and everything. And I was going to the grocery store to get supplies for the week,
Yep.
coffee and make stuff to make my Italian sauce with the sauce. Uh, I'm fucking coming back, and I had no idea this happened, but apparently some paparazzi was out there, and they snapped my picture, and I see it the next day on the cover of like this, sort of like the National Enquirer of Helsinki. It was like on the cover, like Monroe guitarist Steve Conte shops for groceries. Like, this is news?
Right.
Yeah, I eat. Yes, I eat. Yes, I cook.
You're right. Um, uh, I think I did hear something and I don't know if you can talk about this, but that Mike was saying something about the next time I come back, maybe it'll be with Hanoi. There was a big Hanoi reunion in the last couple years. They did a show, or maybe I'm just talking out of my ass. And
Yeah, I'm sure he said the opposite. At
okay,
least I would hope he would have said the opposite,
yeah, okay.
because he. I don't think anybody wants to deal with Andy McCoy, really. To tell
I
you.
I hear that. I hear that. Um, okay,
So yeah, and we have a great band. I'm sure.
totally.
Yeah, Hanoi. Just the name Hanoi Rocks might bring in some tickets, but
Yeah,
the. I don't think it would be worth it.
right.
The aggravation,
I completely see.
aggro, as they say.
I mean, you talk about people who have been out of control for, yeah, Johnny Thunders. I'm just shocked that Andy McCoy is still alive personally, but that's just me.
Yep.
So, okay, and now last year you released your solo album that you wrote with Andy Partridge from XTC, and I know you're a big fan of them. It's called The Concrete Jangle. I've been listening to it for the last couple days. I hear the hey shit, this is the guy from Company of Wolves. It's not like a Company of Wolves record, but you hear that songwriting influence all over this album. So when did that are you always writing stuff for future? Even if you're not are you writing stuff for Michael Monroe and then keeping stuff that you're like, hey, this is gonna work for solo albums? And how did you end up working with Andy Partridge?
Yeah, I'm always writing. I got my handy studio right here. It's got my
Right,
voice memos and my notepad. So
right.
lyrics and melodies, na 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 na, all in here.
Yep,
Um, yeah, I just write them, and I kind of decide later what band or situation they're going to be good for.
sure.
Um, some, I might say, oh, this would be good for the Wolves, or
Yep.
if we're doing another Wolves thing, which now we're talking about. So I have a couple of things now. I'm going, oh, I mean, I make playlists in my Apple Music all the time, like next album,
Right.
or future Wolves album, or future Monroe, Mike Monroe songs, or
Right.
so yeah, I kind of compartmentalize stuff, but while I'm writing, I don't really do that. I don't go, I gotta write one for Michael.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes I have when I guess when I know we need one more song kind of like this or whatever, then I will purposely set out to write a certain kind of song. But otherwise, I'm just writing what I hear in my head,
Yeah.
and a lot of times I would just hear a melody and go, oh, it should have this kind of beat, and it should have these chords behind it, and
Right.
next thing you know, there it is.
Well, I'll tell you, I really like 4th of July. One Last Bell. Motor City Love Machine. I was talking about, I think, Decomposing, a song for you. And I actually really do like the Beatles. I think some people say they like the Beatles just because it's cool to say they like the Beatles. But my mom played a lot of Beatles when I was a kid. Anyway, Decomposing, a song for you sounds like, to me, has a Beatles influence. So
Mhm.
the album is called The Concrete Jangle, and I know it's on Amazon. It's on the streaming services.
Yeah.
So
It's on my Bandcamp, with signed copies of the vinyl. I have orange vinyl. It's a beautiful gatefold, so you can like clean your weed, in the middle. And I have also, 7-inch singles of Fourth of July also.
oh, fantastic. Fantastic.
Um, so yeah, these are all my Bandcamp and CDs and shirts and all that. But
Okay.
but yeah, working with Andy was like a dream come true, really. It's how many people get to write with their one of their top 10 songwriting heroes of all time. That's what happened basically. I mean, to write with Andy Partridge for me is like just about like writing with Paul McCartney or
Sure.
Pete Townsend or Keith Richards or Mick Jagger or Elvis Costello or that level. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Just brilliant genius, and I learned a lot writing with him. I had we had gotten hooked up with through a guitar repairman that I knew in New York who worked on my guitars. He built Andy a guitar, and I saw the guitar in his shop, and I was like, "What is that thing?" And he's like, "Oh, I built it for Andy Partridge." I'm like, "You know Andy Partridge? Oh my God, you got to give him my CD. I just made Bleed Together with my brother. This is like 2003."
Sure.
And I gave him a copy, and he sent it to Andy, and Andy liked it, but we didn't really have any communication. And then next thing that happened was I became friends with Steve Lillywhite, the producer.
Okay.
I met him at a party, and we became like fast friends, and we started like hanging out. And I was on his radio show, and then he asked me to sub for him and be a sub DJ for him on his radio show. And then one day we were chatting on Twitter, and I brought up XTC and Andy. He was like, "Oh, Andy's on Twitter. We should see if he's on right now and rope him into this conversation." And sure enough, he came on, and he was like, "Conte, you stole my dream gig." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" It's like, guitar player in the New York Dolls. Andy Partridge wanted to be the guitar player in the New York Dolls.
No shit.
Yeah, apparently after Thunders and Nolan quit in '75, Andy, and before XTC was formed, Andy had written David Johansen like a love letter saying, "Hey, I want to be in the band, and I'm gonna, call myself Lord Andrew English." And he had really long hair at the time, and
Right.
so that was when we started chatting, and then next thing you know, I was coming to Swindon, his town in England, with Alice. We were touring with Monroe and Alice Cooper, and he said, "I heard you're going to be in my shithole town." He's like, "I'll buy you lunch." Wow, all right.
Yeah.
So we went and we hung out all day, and it was like we got along like a house on fire, as they say. It was like we'd known each other for years. We just cracked each other up, just laughing and you know telling jokes and passing a guitar back and forth between us. We only had one guitar, so we weren't really jamming, but
Yeah.
it was a great day. And then, we kept in touch. We were emailing each other, and eventually I said, "It's time for me to do a new single for Wicked Cool." This was after I had an album, Bronx Cheer, that came out in 2021, right during the pandemic. Unfortunately, I only
Right.
had one gig on that album, didn't tour.
Right.
But I said to Andy, it's time for me to write another single for Wicked Cool Records. Would you like to write the single with me?
Yeah.
And he was like, "Well, Steve, I sort of swore off writing with other people, but it's not a no." And I was like, "Great." So I ran home and I whipped up this track and I sent it to him. It actually is the last song on the album, "I Dream Her."
Yeah.
But didn't have a title yet, didn't have any lyrics, didn't, had a little bit of a melody. And he said, "Yeah, that's great, but it sounds too finished. He goes, why don't we start something from scratch? Let's do a Zoom. And I said, yes. But we did a Zoom and we wrote 4 songs that one day instead of just
Wow.
one. And then we came back another time. We wrote 4 more. So we wrote 8 songs.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
And then, so like, where did you record it? Was it then, did you wrote the songs? Like, did you go in with a producer, or how did the album get
Well,
made?
the way that we wrote was, I mean, when I say we wrote 4 songs, I mean, we came up with the
Yeah.
germ of, 4 songs. So it'd
Right.
be like a verse and a chorus, basically.
Right.
Yeah, verse 1, chorus 1. It was up to me then. I said, okay, I'll go away. I'll make demos. I came up with the intro. I came up with the middle 8. I came up with verse 2. I came out with the outro. I like basically me and Andy worked on 1 verse, 1 chorus, and then I fleshed out the rest of the song myself.
Sure.
And I would send him that demo, and then he would give me comments. Cut out these bars, change this lyric, try putting this there. Whatever his comments were. And so I gave him production credit on the album actually because he had a lot to do with how stuff ended up,
Sure.
wise. And once I had demos that we both liked, that we both said, that's done.
Yep.
Sometimes be down to like 1 word. That 1 word is not right. Then the song is not done yet.
Right.
But as soon as we both said the song is done, then that went in the finished category, the finished pile.
Sure.
And once I had 5, I had, let's see, I had 5 Conte Partridge songs, which he insisted that I put my name first, by the way. I wanted to put Partridge Conte, but he was like, no, it's my name just stops the flow. Just do Conte Partridge.
Right.
Partridge Conte just, nah.
Right.
So once I had the 5 Andy and me songs, I was like, well, there's the core of an album right there. And now I just got to pick 5 of my own songs that go with these.
Sure.
So that's why I picked Decomposing, because it's XTC, Beatles, very melodic, 60s, psychedelic, I picked Girl with No Name because I also thought that was very power pop.
Yeah.
That was when that's actually a really old song, and so is Motor City Love Machine. Those are both from the 80s. I wrote those in like 1984.
Wow.
384. Yeah, I mean, they had different, Motor City Love Machine was completely different lyrics and melody. But, and what else? I Dream Her was a recent song, and All Tied Up was a recent song.
Sure.
But, I picked those 5 that would go with the 5 that we wrote together, and then I called Prairie Prince, the drummer from the Tubes, and Todd Rundgren and XTC Skylarking, and I didn't really know him, but apparently he knew who I was from the Dolls and Michael. And he said, "Oh yeah, I know who you are." Yeah, and I said, "Well, I've written these songs with Andy, and I can't think of any better drummer than you, who I've already played on Andy songs and XTC records." So he was like, "Do it," and he flew out to New York, or I flew him out to New York, and he lives in San Francisco, and we cut those 5 tracks with him, or no, actually 7. He played on 2 of my songs as well.
Right.
But like more than half the album is with Prairie Prince on drums, and then Tommy Price from Joan Jett, Billy Idol, Mink DeVille was on a couple songs, and Brian Delaney from the Dolls is on one. But I basically produced myself, and we worked with the engineer up at Little Steven's studio, Renegade.
Yeah.
Jeff Sanoff. I produced it myself, and I would, at the end of the record, play them for Little Steven, see what he thinks, and he had some comments, and but basically, I produced it myself.
What's your opinion on bands who just stop recording? Because you seem like you're constantly writing and putting out new music, and some of these bands that haven't put out an album since the early 90s, and they just are still
Who would do that? Who would do such a thing?
Yeah.
No, seriously, name me a band that does that.
That doesn't write music anymore.
Yes. Yeah.
Poison, Warrant. I mean, a lot of the old.
Okay.
Right.
Do you really need to say any more? I mean, I never liked those bands to
Sure.
begin with. I know you kind of like them,
No, it's
but
okay.
I don't. I think the world's a better place without new music from those guys.
Sure. Sure.
Personally, I mean, even their debuts and their second albums weren't that great.
Right.
But well, hey, if they can milk it playing the M3 festival for the rest of their lives, good for them.
Right.
But I remember seeing a behind the music with Warrant, and one of the dudes is there with like a gold watch, at a computer terminal and like a cubicle. I'm like, this is where the fucking guy is now.
Right.
Jesus.
Right.
So I don't know. I don't want to judge somebody for what they have to do to make a living or whatever, but I never stopped making music, so I don't know what that's like to like stop and get a regular job and decide I'm not going to write any more songs or make any more albums. I mean, the other thing is, of course, the people that go to those shows, they don't want to hear new music from you anyway. They want to hear the old hits. But, like with any band that has to, remain, what's the word? Not valid, but
Relevant.
relevant. Thank you. Man, you are the wordsmith today. I'm just like,
Chicks just love me for my big dictionary.
I can't understand not wanting to put out new records, even if you only play one song from that record.
Right.
Like I saw Paul McCartney recently. He did this thing at the Bowery,
Yeah.
the ballroom, tiny little club of 500 people. Tiny for him,
Yep.
big for me.
Yeah.
But he played, an evening of crazy, Beatles, Wings, Solo Paul, just like every song, like wow, genius stuff. And then he did one new song,
Right.
and like for that one new song, okay, I get it. He's got a new album. He wants to play his new stuff.
Sure.
At least it wasn't 6 songs from his new album.
Right.
But I don't know if artists know it when they should stop
Sure.
writing, stop trying to make new records because they've lost the plot somewhere along the way. But I mean, unless someone tells me it's time to stop, I'm not going to stop because I personally think, and I think I'm a pretty good judge. I personally think I'm doing the best stuff of my career now.
Sure.
I think the album I just put out is 100 times better than stuff I was writing in Company Wolves.
Right.
Although I like the Wolf stuff too. It's
Yeah.
not that it was bad at all, but just I've kind of I know what I'm about more now.
Right.
I'm about a certain melody and poetry and soul that maybe back then I was just like I just want to rock.
Yeah.
And now I'm like a little more mature.
You're mature. Yep. I've already kept you for so long. I want to wrap it up, but that was going to be my next question is how long does Steve Conte have left to rock? I mean, and what are you hoping to do? What are the things that you haven't done yet that you're like, hey, I still have some goals that I want to accomplish. Here's what I want to do.
Well, musicians, as far as I know, never retire. They just play till they drop.
Yep.
Unless unless all of a sudden you lose the use of your hands or your
Sure.
throat or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm not going to stop until I have to.
Yep.
God forbid I have to, because something happens to me or I die first.
Right.
But I'm just going to keep going, and if I start sucking, if I can't play anymore, can't sing anymore, and I realize it,
Yep.
I'll stop. I think.
Right.
but um, but yeah, I have I mean, besides my own goals, which is, I would love to just see, I've got a lot of my songs in film and TV, and
Yeah.
I would just love to see one of my songs become that, opening credits or end credits of a movie where that can take you, because there's no more like record company push and that kind of money to get you
Right.
in front of, like, if you Google my name or put my name in Spotify, the first things that come up are all these Japanese anime soundtracks that I've done,
That's
because
right.
they're listened to worldwide by millions of
Yeah.
kids. It's like the most popular thing. Spotify, it's like millions of plays on my
Yeah.
number one Spotify song. I didn't write it. I just sang it. It's a
Yeah.
high session thing, but it's there with my name. So like
Right.
people think it's my song. It's not. Um, so if I could get some of that kind of stuff happening with my own songs, that would be great.
Sure.
That's one of my goals.
Sure.
Um, and of course, hey, to have a hit record, but I know what it takes to have a hit record. I just tried to, you know, contact a few radio people about what would it be like to push a single from Concrete Jungle, and I found out it's way more money than I could ever afford.
Right.
I mean, record companies have so much money, they can throw 10 grand for 6 weeks at somebody, and I can't
Right.
do that. So I know what it takes to have a hit record, and I mean, of course, it's a good song, and it's a good story and everything else. But I think I got good songs and good stories. I just don't have good money. I just
Right.
don't have the kind of money to have
Sure.
that. But that's certainly a fantasy of mine, a
Yeah.
dream of mine, and a goal
Yep.
is to have that. And there are still other people I want to. I mean, I like playing with Michael, but I would love to play with Chrissy Hind. I'm going to put it out there, putting it out there in the universe. Chrissy, call me. I want to be in the Pretenders. I want to play with Chaka Khan. I want to play with Robert Plant. I want to play with Roger Daltrey. I want to play with Paul, my friend Brian Ray. We have a band together. He's Paul McCartney's guitar player.
No shit.
He's been playing with Paul for 25 years. I'd love to play with Paul. I'd love
Yeah.
to play with Townsend. I'd love,
Yeah.
my heroes, Keith,
Yeah.
Woody, Mick, you know,
Unbelievable that those guys are still out there doing it.
Rod.
Rod. Right. I get you.
I mean, there ain't many. Paul Westerberg, Tom Waits,
Hey,
probably not weird enough to play with Tom Waits, but I love Tom Waits.
you just said Westerberg. I am a huge Replacements fan.
Huge,
Huge Replacements fan and Westerberg solo.
yeah, 14
Love that
songs.
band. Yeah. Man, is there anything else that you want to promote that we haven't covered? We talked about the new solo album. We talked new Michael Monroe coming in the next, hopefully this year. Hopefully new Company of Wolves. Man, that just made my fucking day. So is there anything else that I haven't covered that you would like to get out there?
Just that people can find me on the web, on my website,
Yep.
steveconte.com, and Bandcamp is a genius little place.
Yes.
I don't know if everybody's familiar with it. At first, when I first heard the name, I was like, Bandcamp, what is it, like for beginners, camp?
Yeah.
But no, it's become, especially since the pandemic, and they started doing Bandcamp Fridays where they give 100% of the
To the artists.
sales to the artists, because it was a tough couple of years there with, not being able to work. So
Yes.
they've been really great. And so I have a lot of stuff there on Bandcamp. I sell all my records that I own the rights to,
Yep.
which is everything but the last two that I did for Wicked Cool, Concrete Jangle and Bronx Cheer. I can't sell digital downloads on there, but I sell hard copies signed.
Sure.
But I also sell my solo album, Steve Conte and the Crazy Truth, Steve Conte NYC, International Cover Up, digital and CDs,
Yes.
shirts, and these weird like one-off tracks. I did a Divinals cover. I did a jazz tune from my younger days.
Yeah.
A couple other solo acoustic songs. There's, and you can just put out new music on Bandcamp whenever you want. Like I could just write a new song,
Absolutely.
record it today, put it up tomorrow. So there's always a reason to go to Bandcamp to have a look at my Steve Conte Bandcamp page. And we have a Conte Brothers Bandcamp page too, me and my brother.
I
And we
was
have KLOL's Bandcamp page.
I was just gonna ask, what is your brother doing now?
He's getting ready to put out his first solo record.
Okay.
A long time coming. And it's really great stuff. He's a really sensitive, thoughtful, how can I describe him? Just he's a lot softer than me. I'm like the loud guy,
Yeah.
and he's like understated, and he'll play a song and you'll cry, you know,
Right.
like he's that guy. He writes really great stuff. So he's about to put that out. I'm not sure the title of his album,
Sure.
but he's got a Bandcamp page. You can hear some of his songs on his Bandcamp page.
Yep.
You can hear the Wolf. We have the Wolf stuff up there. Company Wolf's Bandcamp page. That's where you can find me.
I will put those links to your website and your Bandcamp and the Company of Wolves Bandcamp in the description. So go down there and check out Steve's stuff. It has been thank you so much. I've taken a lot of your time. I really appreciate you filling me in on these bands that I love so much.
I appreciate it, Andy. It's been my pleasure.